Apple just updated some of their iPads, and I'm going to kind of go through some of the new updates, the new features, and kind of look at the new iPad lineup and hopefully help you to see which iPad is right for you. So let's start off with some of the changes that Apple made to their iPad lineup. Let's start with the first two iPads that were announced, the iPad Air models. And now Apple's giving us two sizes of iPad Airs. There's an 11-inch and a 13-inch iPad Air. Now the dimensions for the 11-inch iPad Air are the same as last generation's 10.9-inch iPad Air. And you might think, well, that means that Apple gave us a bigger display by shrinking those bezels on the iPad Air, but that isn't what actually happened, because if you look closely on their website, you can see Apple put some very small text there under the display, letting you know that the display is actually 10.86 inches, not really 11 inches, so it's about the same size as the last generation iPad Air. The same thing with the iPad Air 13-inch. It's called 13-inch, but it actually measures to 12.9 inches, similar to the last generation iPad Pro. So these displays are pretty much exactly the same as last generation's iPad Air. You're also going to get the M2 chip inside the iPad Air instead of the M1 chip, and also the selfie camera has moved so that landscape video is much better. And that's much better for Zoom calls or FaceTime calls, because it actually looks like you're looking at the person speaking to you, as opposed to the other way. It almost seemed like you were looking to the left of the person. I know it's not a huge deal, but it's just a better overall experience if you do a lot of video calls. And those are really it when it comes to the major changes with the iPad Air. Price is still $599 for the 11-inch, and 13-inch is $799. But you will get double the starting storage, which is really nice. It starts at 128 gigabytes. That's a really welcome change. 64 gigabytes of starting storage for the iPad Air, the last generation iPad Air, is just ridiculous. You're also going to get some new colors to choose from, but nothing really that stood out to me when it came to the colorway. Now, when it comes to the iPad Pro, though, there's some notable changes. This is where I think Apple really focused their iPad updates for this year. First of all, let's start with the design. Apple says this is the thinnest Apple device ever. Not iPad ever, thinnest Apple device ever. And they said it's even thinner than the iPod Nano. If you remember that, and you remember how thin that device was. This is a super thin device at only 5.11 millimeters for the 13-inch and 5.3 millimeters for the 11-inch. And Apple claims that the battery life for these two new iPads, even though it's thinner, it's the same as the last generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro. Now the displays are where these iPad Pros really shine. Apple's calling the new display Ultra Retina XDR display. Of course, it's going to have ProMotion technology. It's an OLED panel, of course, and Apple even says that they combined two OLED panels to get that combined light that brings great brightness, better dynamic range, just better performance all around. This is going to be an amazing display. There's no doubt about it. And both iPads are going to get that same amazing display, which is really nice that Apple didn't exclude the smaller 11-inch from getting the best display possible. Now, one thing that's missing with these new iPad Pros, the rear-facing camera. There's only one 12-megapixel wide camera on the back. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in my usage with the iPad Pro. I never use a camera on my tablets unless you're a big photography person with your iPad. You might be missing that ultra wide camera sensor on the back. I don't think it's a huge deal. I don't think many people are using cameras on their iPad, and if you are, you should probably stop using the camera on your iPad anyways. You're also getting the selfie camera moved to the landscape position, so it's a lot better for video calls, just like the iPad Air. And another huge change with these new iPads, you're getting the M4 chip. Brand new chipset. The iPad Pro is the first device to get the M4 chip. It's a 10-core CPU, 10-core GPU, a 16-core neural engine. This is the best of the best from Apple. But honestly, this is way more power than any iPad Pro user will probably ever need. I think the M1 or the M2 chip was way more power than the iPad Pro actually needed. I don't feel like the applications you use on your iPad Pro, iPad OS, is really built to take advantage of the power that the M4 has, but You never know what happens in the future. Maybe Apple announces some great new features with iPadOS at WWDC this year. The M4 is going to be a nice fit with all those new features. We'll have to wait and see. And Apple also announced the new Apple Pencil, the Apple Pencil Pro, which is pretty much, I guess, replacing the Apple Pencil 2. It's still $129. There's some new features like a squeeze feature to bring up a menu, a barrel roll, which is great for artists, and haptic feedback. So really, it's just going to be a better Apple Pencil for those that like to draw on their iPads and do things like that. Other than that, there isn't really much of a difference. Design-wise, it looks exactly the same as the Apple Pencil 2nd generation, and we didn't get a new colorway as I thought we could possibly get. I wish Apple would have given us an Apple Pencil Pro in black. That would have been great. Apple also announced a Magic Keyboard for the iPad Pro, and it looks very similar to the previous Magic Keyboard, but you're getting a larger glass trackpad with haptic feedback. There's a 14 key function row on the keyboard itself, and it looks to be made with more premium materials than the previous Magic Keyboard, but more of the same. You have that same floating design as the previous Magic Keyboard, and it looks to have similar viewing angles. And that's pretty much everything new that Apple announced with the iPads. But there was one last announcement that I think is probably the biggest change to Apple's iPad lineup, and that's with the entry-level iPad. They dropped the price, the starting price of that entry-level iPad to $349. That just kind of shifts the whole price of the iPad lineup and really gives you a better option for purchasing an iPad. You have a more modern design, some new features, and $349, I think, is a great starting price for that iPad. It didn't make sense when it was $449. It's a much better value at $349. So now you can kind of look at this lineup, and you have that entry-level iPad at $349. You have the iPad mini. There was no updates or refreshes to the iPad mini. It's still the same previous iPad mini, and that still starts at $499, which is kind of expensive now that we got these new model iPads. But you have the entry-level iPad at $349, you have the iPad mini at $499, you have the iPad Air 11-inch at $599, you have the iPad Air 13-inch at $799, and then you have the iPad Pros starts at $999, and you have the 13-inch that starts at $1299. They have to do something about that iPad mini, because I don't think at $499 it's a really good value. It starts at 64 gigabytes, the iPad mini, and the iPad Air at $599 is a bigger display, better chipset, double the storage at 128 gigabytes. It's just a way better value at $599. Unless you really want a small iPad, I think most people are just going to skip the iPad mini. I really think that the iPad Air right there in the middle, $599 for the 11-inch and the 13-inch for $799, is the best option for most people. I don't think most people need the power that the iPad Pro has or that amazing display that it has. Most people are going to be happy with what the iPad Air offers. The M2 chip inside the iPad Air is going to be able to handle most of what the iPad throws at it. There really isn't a task that I can't see the M2 chip handling on the iPad. Even the entry-level iPad at $349 is just a great value. If you're looking to get your first iPad, that's definitely the best option to go with. And then if you want something a little bit more, the $599 iPad Air is where to go. And if you want a larger display, the $799 13-inch is the next best option. iPad Pros are going to be for a specific group of people that just want the best of the best. I don't think you need it though. And the iPad mini is there in the middle, kind of awkwardly sitting there. And I don't think most people should go with the iPad mini unless you just desperately need a smaller display like the iPad mini. But those are my thoughts. What do you think of Apple's new iPad lineup? Let me know with a comment down below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos just like this one on tech news, reviews, and opinions, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our new videos, and I'll see you on the next one.